Hi, my name is Tara Kachaturoff, and I'm the host of Michigan Entrepreneur, where we feature businesses from startup to stellar. Today I have as my special guest Greg Peters, who is the founder of The Reluctant Networker. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Tara. It's good to be here.
Well, you know, the last time we talked to you was like a couple of years ago. We were talking about networking tips and things for entrepreneurs, and today we're going to be talking about your book. And I'm going to hold it up right here. It's called Hello and a Handshake. The Reluctant Networker's Guide to Survival and Success at Your Next Business Gathering. My favorite words in the subtitle is The Reluctant Networker's Guide, because I'm not a big on the whole networking thing, and I know like 99% of the people out there aren't. But before we jump into the book, which is like filled, I mean, it's like almost an inch thick of information about to help you be a fantastic networker. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and what led you up to creating this business called The Reluctant Networker?
Well, I was a computer programmer working at University of Michigan. I decided to start my own business. Discovered very rapidly that waiting aggressively by the phone doesn't make anything happen. So I started doing the networking so that I could build the business. And I was relatively successful at doing so. 2007, I decided to go full-time on the business, which was an exciting time to do anything in the world. And I was fortunate, though, because I had networked so well, the business continued to grow. Unfortunately, I discovered in about 2009 that I wasn't enjoying doing this anymore. It was frustrating to me, and there was nothing new. It didn't really feed my soul anymore. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to a friend at the Ann Arbor Chamber, and she said, well, did you ever think about teaching people how you grew your business? And that was sort of the point where The Reluctant Networker was born. So I started speaking and training others and doing a little bit of writing too.
And I really think the word reluctant is like the perfect word, because we want to do it, but we don't always put a word behind what we don't want to do with networking, and it's because we're reluctant. There's a million things that are running through our head, and I think that picking that term really resonates with people, and I'm really glad that you named your business that. And that it's also in the subtitle of your book. So you decided to write a book. When did that come about? I mean, we all think about books and whatever, but what part, where did that happen in the evolution of your business that, hey, I think I better put this in a book, it's time?
Well, it's funny because it was sort of a long path. I started writing a blog, and I decided to write every single day, and I did for about a year and a half.
That's good. That's great.
Not bad. So I created a lot of content that way, and then my child was born, and after that, things kind of went downhill as far as doing that every day. A few years later, I decided to create an audio program. When I did so, I didn't realize that you actually had to write a script for that. And that audio program ended up being about 3 hours long, which is roughly 30,000 words. And then as time went on, I realized there were better and probably other ways that I could convey this information. And so I thought, well, I've already got 30,000 words written. So I decided to fill it out, put some stories in, put some additional information I'd learned in the meantime, and it ended up being almost twice as long as that original script. And we just released it earlier this year. And it was, there were really kind of two underlying reasons for it. Mm-hmm. One was purely strategic. The nice thing about a book is it's like a business card that no one's going to throw away. So I can get my name out there, people see it, and it provides a certain level of credibility. In speaking with some of my fellow speakers, one of them told me, she said, I earned a PhD, and I think I get more credibility from the book I wrote than from the degree.
Right.
Now, on my mission, though, I know that even if I'm speaking 200 times a year, that's only a certain number of people I can be in front of. Whereas if I can consolidate some of the ideas I have into a book and then get it into people's hands, I can affect much more, a greater audience, and hopefully help those people that are like I was, sitting in the corner of the room, hoping that networking is going to happen to me.
And the other good thing for all the people like myself that are reluctant networkers, we have a book that when we're not networking, which we probably won't be because we're still reluctant, we can be reading the book and taking some ideas in and getting familiar with concepts that will help us later when we feel like we've got our sea legs and we can go out there and do what we need to do as a networker. And you can take notes in it. Well, almost every, this book is filled. There are a couple pages in here where you can write some notes, but really there's so much information. And I also like about the book is, as you can see, like there's some information boxes that you have throughout the book. And I'll tell you, those are really helpful for bringing concepts, focusing in on what's important, because you can really go through it. You have like for different topics in here, you'll put advantages, disadvantages, and tactics for a specific type of strategy. This is so helpful. Or questions you should ask yourself, and they're clearly delineated. And you use bolding, so we don't have to search around for things. Half of the greatness of a book is the utility of the book, and there's so much in here like that. And I'll tell you, as somebody who reads a lot of books, the way this book is set up and formatted is so perfect, because networking, you got to be fast and crisp, and the book is built with kind of those principles exuding from the way the formatting is in the book. So to me, I saw much more beyond just the book. When I saw it, it's like, oh my gosh, I can actually find things. And you take things very logically in here. Do this before, do this during, do this after. It's such a well laid out procedural type of thing, so it doesn't leave you wondering.
That's my computer programmer background sneaking in there.
Precisely, that's what it is.
Very process, system oriented. I'm not exciting, but I can get the information in a nice logical format.
That's exactly what it is. See, all things working together, all those things that you know and are part of you coming through in this book. But for somebody who's a networker and needs to find something quickly, it's like you can. It's not like searching through pages and pages and wondering, oh God, what do I do now? You could almost like go to the dessert table and flip through here if you needed to fast and find something. But anyway, we're going to dive into the meat of this book. And you are a networking expert. You've done this for many, many years. You've turned this into a business. So when people say, oh, I have something I really like and enjoy, can I really make a business out of it? Well, absolutely you can, because you've taken something that is a need. Networking is huge for everybody and made it into a business. You've got an audio program, you have other products, you've got this book, you speak all over the place. But let's dive into some of this. You talk about 5 negative networking attitudes. Can you maybe pick out 1 or 2 of those, and let's talk, why don't you drill down on those and how they don't serve you and what you could do instead?
Sure. The negative networking attitudes are just about kind of some of the baggage we carry in. And some of them is, I think one of my favorites is that I don't have time for that. And if you think about what that's saying is I don't think that the value I'm getting out of it is worth the time I'm going to expend. And at first it can seem that way, but networking is a long process. It's as they say, it's gardening, not hunting. So what you have to do is you have to be there. You have to show up. It takes time, but once you start building that set of relationships, you start building your network, that's when the results start pouring in. You have to have that sort of understanding. Otherwise, it can get in your way. It's like, I got the report to finish up today. I don't have time to go and meet with people at the coffee shop. I'm sorry. You have to understand that's going to get in your way, and you're going to lose out on many of the benefits of those long-term connections.
So saying you don't have enough time, don't do that anymore. What's another negative attitude?
The other one is, I think I see quite often is the worry that you're going to be taken advantage of. You're going to show up at these networking events, and people are going to immediately start trying to sell you. They're going to put you in the headlock and try and pick your brain. And part of that is to absorb. You need to absorb a mentality of generosity. Understand that people can't take advantage of you unless you want them to. You are there to give. If you can find something, if I'm talking with Tara and I can discover that she has a need over here that I can connect her to, well then the person I'm connecting to her over here and Tara, they love me, and they're going to start looking for opportunities to help me. You can't be taking advantage of because you're there to give in the first place.
I think those are 2 great examples, because those are the big ones, the time and I'm going to just be taking advantage of it. It's going to be a pick your brain session versus them paying me for my services.
Exactly.
Yeah, those are the big ones for sure. You talk a lot about having things in your toolkit to be an effective networker. Why don't we talk about like 3 tools? Because when people have tools, they can do a better job, right?
Right.
So what's one tool that you would suggest to start off with?
As far as physical tools go, you must have your schedule with you at all times, because you never know who you're going to meet and you want to follow up with them. If you're at a networking event and you're having this chat, you can talk for 5 minutes or so. You're never going to have a deep connection with them after only 5 minutes. What we want is to develop deeper connections, and that takes time. And it's more than a 5-minute conversation in a crowded room talking about the weather. We need to sit down and actually have a real conversation, even if it's over the phone. So having your schedule with you at all times, being able to say, hey, I'm having a great conversation with you. Can we continue this later when we can actually delve in deeper? Let's take a look at our schedules, plan something right now. Because one of the challenges is that we can, if we think, oh, I'll follow up with them later.
Never going to happen.
Later almost never happens because we're all busy.
Right.
So having that schedule with you right then and there, that really makes all the difference in the world.
I have a question, because you're a really busy person and you meet people and you want to follow up with them later. Do you try to like reserve like a specific day or 2 days out of the, or 2 days a week or certain times or dates of the month where you want to kind of put everybody on those 2 days so it can just be like phone or in-person networking, so you can kind of be more efficient, pulling on the computer programmer point of view?
It's going to be a very personal thing. For me, I know that my most creative times are in the morning.
Me too.
And so if I'm doing my writing, if I'm doing any sort of development of content, morning time is very special for me. And my boss, my wife, she told me, okay, well then if that's the case, make sure your networking is done from 1 o'clock on. So I try to reserve, that's my networking time. I don't fill up my week. Usually only 2 or 3 days a week that I'm actually involved in phone calls or being out on the road. But yeah, you've got to decide what your own schedule is going to be and what fits best with your own work style. In my case, afternoons, that's when I do my networking.
And do you find that, is that something that you would suggest for all people that are, to look at their energy levels and to reevaluate their days and see what works
certainly.
best?
I mean, everyone's got the tasks they have to do as part of their job, and when they're best at doing those. I find that the calls and such, those can fit in around when we're best at our work, because calls and emails and all those other things, they don't take as much effort as working on our work.
And the other thing, though, when people are getting that connection, sometimes they turn themselves into a pretzel to fit other people's schedules because they want so bad to have that connection. Can you speak a little bit about that, about, like shedding everything you believe in and your schedule and everything to be connected with somebody, to let them have their way to make it all work? I know you have to look at each thing individually, but a lot of people will do that because they're so like needy for that connection, or I want to look like I'm always going to be there and do whatever they need, so that way I'll get the next contract when it's up for bid, or
Yeah, we have to be careful about that, because networking's goal is to create great relationships, and if we're not being true to ourselves, then they're not connecting with our true selves in the first place.
Right.
But second, you have to ask yourself, if you're so desperate for this connection, are you trying to connect with them, or are you trying to connect with their wallet? I mean, a lot of people, the reason they're so desperate is because they, as you pointed out.
That's what I was trying to get at, but the way you said it was much better.
I want that contract, and so I'm going to, wouldn't it be better to be a real person and even have someone else connecting you with them? I mean, yes, sometimes I'll say, all right, yeah, I can meet with you in the morning, and that's okay. It happens once in a while. But in general, I think it's best to stick with what's best for you. If someone else isn't meshing with you, they might not be the best networking connection in the first place.
Right.
And that happens. Two perfectly wonderful people sometimes just, don't get along.
Yeah, and I've had situations come up where they only want something in the evening, and I just can't do it because I don't work in the evening. It's just not something that I
Then it's easy.
do,
Could we have a lunchtime phone call instead? I mean, You have to make sure it's good for you too.
Right. And that's good to keep in mind, though, because sometimes people start editing themselves when they get in these networking situations because of, they're not coming in with the right perspective about the relationship first. So what's another tool in addition to having your schedule ready, whether it's on paper or electronically so that you can make that appointment? What's another tool that you would suggest for people who are reluctant networkers?
I would actually, information. Contact the organizer or whoever invited you to a particular event, because this book is primarily about going to events. Find out, where's it located? Are there going to be any challenges getting there? Where's the parking? The more information you have, the more comfortable you are when you walk in, and the more yourself you can be. When you're all agitated and tense,
right.
How can you be yourself at that point? So I always say, find out even what the dress code is.
Right.
Because if you walk in wearing the wrong clothes, if you're wearing, a beach shirt and flip-flops and everybody else is wearing a three-piece suit, you're going to feel out of step.
Absolutely, yeah. And even with events that are big, knowing how far away the parking is, like for women, if you're going to be walking in high heels for like a half a mile, you kind of want to know that, because you're going to want to wear flats and bring your other shoes, because you have to prepare with the right size bag to put everything in.
Exactly.
So make sure you know about the venue, because you never know what you're going to be walking on, or if you're, you just don't know.
And that's why I tell people also show up 10, 15 minutes early, because in that situation, you knew about it even, and you still have to walk it. That takes time.
Absolutely. One of the things that, going to any event, especially if you're just going by yourself and you're not bringing somebody with you like a friend, which is always helpful, is breaking the ice with strangers. Even the word stranger, like stranger danger,
danger.
it's like, it doesn't, the word doesn't feel good. It feels like alone and awful and scary. But what are some tips you can give people for breaking the ice? I mean, you could stand in the corner, but sometimes you're going to have to move and go out into the crowd, right?
It's funny. When I'm giving some of my presentations, we talk about the whole stranger danger thing, and it's a pattern that we've got ingrained in us from way. It's not just our moms. I mean, it goes way back. Anybody that's not part of the tribe is a danger to us. So how do you get around a mindset thing? It's not just technique, because I could teach all the technique in the world, but it's not going to change the fact if you don't go up and talk to people, you don't need it.
How do you slowly wean yourself into not feeling that stranger danger?
A different mindset. If you've thrown a party, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you're familiar with the concept of a party?
Yeah.
Well, if you pretend you're having a party and you've invited your next door neighbor, and they show up with their brother from out of town whom you do not know. They're a stranger, right? But do you ignore them?
No.
No, because they're a guest.
Right.
You're the host. So take that same mentality into the networking event. You're now the host of the event. It doesn't have to be official, but just take on that persona of the host.
Yeah, that completely shifts.
Because then you're looking for that poor, sad person that's sitting off to the side that maybe you once were.
Right.
And you can go rescue them. I was talking to an executive one time, and she said that's exactly what she does. She found this poor guy sitting off by himself at a table, and she sat down and started chatting with him. Turned out he was the president of the local bank.
My goodness.
Wouldn't that be great to have that person in your network?
Right.
So, look for them. They're not necessarily bad people to know, they're just alone.
And bringing something up about that, kind of getting off a little bit, is that people are reluctant, whether you're there the CEO of a bank, or it doesn't matter what your level is. That has nothing to do with your reluctance or your, ease of networking, right? I mean, because you've worked with all sorts of people, I'm sure.
Yeah. We're all people.
Universal
we all have
problem.
those patterns stuck inside us, things we've learned, and it's hard. It's really hard to go up and talk to people we don't know.
Well, I think the idea about being a host and going and taking on the persona of being the host even when you're not of the party or the event, and going up to others and introducing yourself is great. So what would you suggest about first ways of introducing yourself? You could just say hi and my name, but what else? What other types of things would you suggest?
Well,
and what's the approach?
Hi and my name works really good. I'm going to emphasize that. Don't try to get too imaginative here. If it's a professional event, it's perfectly okay to ask them what do you do, or what industry are you in? I especially like the second one because sometimes
Yeah.
people are at events and they're involuntarily in transition.
Yeah.
And so asking
Yeah.
them what they do for a living makes them a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But if you can ask them what industry they're in, get them talking about themselves. The whole idea is I prefer to ask questions. Be interested, be fascinated by the people around you. That allows them to feel comfortable because they're talking about the subject they know most about themselves.
Right.
And at that point, especially when you're first meeting them, it's more important for you to find out about them and whether or not you make there's good chemistry between you. Because if there isn't, again, we're not going to make a very good networking partnership.
Yeah, and I know it's not always, the first time you meet somebody is not always necessarily the perfect thing, but you know what? I've always paid attention to what happens the very first time I meet somebody, and it's never wrong. So if it didn't feel right then, trying to force it later, because a lot of people try to force these things later, I'll follow up, and then they try to force a relationship. If it doesn't feel good, I typically walk away. I don't really care who they are, because there's something telling me, and it's probably that, going back to our primitive brain.
We actually accept, I know from my martial arts training, we have a lot of input that we don't recognize consciously.
Yeah.
And if you've got a gut feeling that something's not right,
Probably isn't.
Let it go.
Let's talk about a couple of biggest fears and pet peeves. First of all, what is the biggest fear, or two of the biggest fears people have about networking? What do they have? Looking like a fool, or is that on there? I mean, it's the top two. What would they be?
I would say, they feel like they're exposed. They feel like they're vulnerable, and so they're afraid that they're going to get rejected. I mean, that's huge. Walking up to someone and trying to work your way up to a conversation and have someone walk away from you. Right. Oh, it's hard.
It's happened to me.
Yeah, it happens to all of us. I still remember talking with some guy, and he kept looking over my shoulder, and then apparently he saw someone more important, and he just literally in mid-sentence walked off to go talk to them.
Wow.
Okay. But I think you have to remember that's on them. If they don't want to know who you are, let that go.
Yeah.
We have to avoid investing too much in any one connection we make at a networking event. Our goal is to meet as many people as possible.
Great point. Great point. Don't put all the eggs in one basket, even when it comes to networking.
Oh yeah.
Get out there.
Yeah. When you go to those events, I think people they think they have to have a great conversation to make a sale at that moment. No. Meet with, talk 5 minutes at a time with different people. Meet them. If you've carefully selected your location, you're already in the right place.
Right.
And almost anyone there is going to make a good connection for you. So.
Yep. And that's all about picking the right event.
Yeah.
So besides the fear of rejection, which is probably the number one human issue, what's another big fear of people in the networking situation?
I think they're afraid they don't know what to talk about. That they're going to be sitting next to someone, that's uncomfortable, that silence in the room. And to that, I just say, ask good questions. Find out what industry, how long have they been in that industry? I love, once I find out, if they've been somewhere longer than 3 years, ask them if anything has changed. Because I guarantee if they've been there for 3 years, something has changed, and they probably have a fairly strong opinion about it.
Yeah.
You don't have to talk anymore. You can just listen. And the same thing works even if you're not talking about their business. You can ask them about what do they like to do when they're not being an accountant. I had a great conversation about kite flying one time.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't realize how many changes there have been in the kite flying industry. It was fascinating.
You just never know.
You just never know.
And then when it gets, and I love the whole thing about asking questions. That's why I like sitting in this chair as opposed to sitting in that chair. I actually take very few interviews because I don't like it, because I'm so used to being in this position. It's so much easier for me. What are some pet peeves people have about networking? So you're at the event and you're kind of on the other side of it. What are two things people just can't stand about being at events?
The big one, I would say, is being sold at. Mm-hmm. Having that person come up and just try to put you in they're trying to make you as miserable as possible so that you'll buy from them. I mean, no one enjoys that at all. And I'd say probably closely related to that is that whole 30-second elevator pitch. Oh, page 68.
Page 68, folks.
It's if you think about the whole concept of a pitch, It's literally about selling. And think about the alternative names for it. There's the 30-second commercial. Is a commercial or a pitch part of a normal conversation where you're trying to develop a relationship, even a friendship? Never.
Never.
So be able to say what you do in about 7 seconds and then move on. The important thing is developing the connection, not that they remember that you make children smile because you're a pediatric dentist. No, don't do any of that stuff. Just be natural. It's conversation between human beings.
And yet people still teach it, and it's so awful.
Yeah.
It's truly awful, and I just can't even do that. I'd rather talk about the weather. I just or the food, because I can have all sorts of conversations around food. I'm going to take a little bit of a tangent off of this, but what benefits have you had for yourself from writing this book? I mean, personally or professionally? Because, this book has helped evolve you too in your business. What has been the biggest benefit for you?
From a business standpoint, it's been a great way for me to stay in contact with people. I can reach back to almost everybody that I've spoken in front of their group before and say, hey, it's been a while since we talked. I'd love to catch up with you. What's been going on in your life? This is what's been happening in mine. I just finished this book. Love to send you a copy. And it's actually already turning into business for me. It's an excuse. And so far, people have said they really like it.
Well, I loved it. And I just think the quality of the book, the way it's laid out, the information, of course. But, I see so many different books, and it's just such a beautiful book. And even mine is autographed by the author. I have a special sticker on it. So it was just really very impressive to me, and it really fit for the way you want to be when you go to a networking event. You want to make an impression.
Well, and even the book is an example of networking. I network to find my editor, and if someone's writing a book, get an editor. You need one. They make you sound like a better version of yourself. I had a typesetter that helped me actually with all the layout that you were talking about earlier. I had another person who put me in touch with a printer. It was all networked. I didn't go out and search for these people. I had a network that recommended them to me.
So you really actually use the principles in the book.
Yes.
You actually do what you say you do.
I walk the talk, as it were.
and what's the next evolution of you? You got the book now. What do you think is the next step?
Well, actually, right now we're working on the electronic version, so people can download it to their Kindle.
Oh, great!
And then probably right after that will be the audio version. So
will you be reading it yourself?
Probably,
Good.
yes.
Good.
And then actually, I'm already working on the next book, which is Beyond Hello and a Handshake. What do you do after the event? So.
Oh my gosh, great! When do you think that will come out?
Maybe a couple of years. Literally, I'm still in the outlining stage right now.
So that's great. I'm so excited for you about that because I was excited when we first talked about this. We've already come to the end of our time, which is hard to believe. But as my final question to you, if you could leave somebody with one piece of advice from this book, even if we've already talked about it, what would be that one piece of advice that you want to leave today's reluctant networker?
Don't go it alone. You don't have to. You get all the benefits in the world from having people in your life, and that's what this is about. It's about meeting new people and being successful as a result.
Well said. I want to thank you, Greg Peters, founder of The Reluctant Networker and author of Hello and a Handshake. Great book. I love it. I've read it. Thanks so much for being a guest on our program once again.
Thank you.
If you'd like more information about our program, please visit us at www.michiganentrepreneurtv.com. Please join me again in the future when I interview another enterprising entrepreneur. Until then, wishing you the best of business.